Roll call, please.
Sure. Commissioner DeVorak?
Here.
Commissioner Spitaleri? Commissioner Lennon?
Here.
Oh, yes, those are, I'm sorry, yes. Ms. Coca Fulton?
Here.
Mr. Neola? Mr. Oros?
Here.
Mr. McCaskey?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Goris?
Here.
Mr. Claypool?
Yep.
Mr. Burgansky?
Here.
Thank you.
Has everyone had an opportunity to review the regular minutes from our meeting of August 9th, 2022? Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd ask for a motion for approval.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
I'll abstain.
I'll abstain.
Nick?
I wasn't there, I'll abstain.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that was Mr. Noel?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we can move on to the financial report and approval of expenses.
So, what, I'm sorry, so motion passes?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start with the summary of expenses first, because it was a little bit divided up this time. So for the summary for expenses, Ms. Cobus, we had two actual mileage reimbursements. One came out of an other account because our new account for our travel, which all the mileage is going to start coming out of, that wasn't approved until June 1st. So I had to split up her mileage, pay it out of an other account, which was $19.89. And then she had a mileage, all her mileage after June 1st came out of our travel account, which was $26.79. We also had out of the travel account, I had a payment because Ms. Cobus is going to go to a GIS conference for her registration. And I made a payment to the County Engineers Association of Ohio, and that was for $329. Then also out of the travel account, I had a reimbursement for myself, which was $65.50. And then to go to Staples, we had a couple orders since we moved into the new building. We ordered some new things that we needed for our office. So for the Staples account, we have one invoice was for $71.25. I have another one that was a big order we have, and I have a copy of the order if you guys want to see some of what the items we purchased. $294.28. And then we had one for $29.95, which gives us a total of $836.66 we paid.
Any questions or comments?
Okay, and then for the finance report, so our appropriations for the month were $210,592. Our total expenditures so far have been $137,975.95, and we have a balance left of $72,616.03.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I would seek a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Passes. Thank you. We're going to move on to other business. So the reappointment of Nicholas Doris to fulfill the term through December 31st of 2024. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I thought it was something I said, Nick.
No, it wasn't that. Thank you.
And we're going to move on to the director's report. Linda.
Okay. So first up is the model zoning resolution
So after all that time talking about the sign section, the amended pages were completed. They were put in the Dropbox link, and we will be sending notification to the townships once that information is posted to the website, and then they can refer to it and then download that. But now I know that's been a long time coming for those different articles, but we're going to continually be reviewing the model. But I just wanted to let you know that that end of it has been completed in the township, so we notify.
So Linda, real quick, it sounds like you're able to post things on the website yourself now?
I can't. For
You
the
can.
for the model, that still goes through the prosecutor's office.
Okay, but
Yeah.
you do have access to the, with your website now?
Yes, we,
For,
to update,
Yep.
yeah, we just had the training on
okay,
WordPress.
good.
So hopefully this meeting will be the one where we try to post the
Okay.
meeting minutes ourselves.
Great.
So Linda, let me ask you a question. You just made a comment about model zoning going through the prosecutor's office. Do we have a copy of the model zoning posted on our website?
It is on our website, but when amendments are made to it, it has to be sent to the county prosecutor, and then the county prosecutor goes through ADP to post it to the planning commission's website. So, no, it's been like that even when the former director was here. So it's completely instructed by the county prosecutor himself that I don't have any rights to that document to post it. It has to go through the prosecutor's office
Yeah,
to post
and
it.
I disagree with that in the post.
I know you do, I know you do.
Because the prosecutor does not own that document. We own that document. And so I'd like to officially, I'm not sure if we make a motion or whatever to challenge that, but I'd like to challenge that.
Right, so that's something that we certainly can, maybe just spend like a minute on it right now. If there is enough interest on the board, obviously you have one voice, and that's something that we've talked about in the past. I can certainly look into that, and I can report to the board, and let you know what would be become of that. I don't know if we need like an official action at this point.
I'd like to get, if you could get some better clarification from the county prosecutor, say why he thinks he owns it.
I would suggest reaching out to the State Attorney General's office, get an Attorney General opinion, and while we might think that this is meaningless and it, really doesn't have an impact, it is a significant precedential kind of a thing. I mean, as a planning commission, we either have control over our planning documents or we don't. And we need to establish that clearly. And we cannot have an unruly prosecutor, in my opinion.
I tried to get something for months and Skip for state to rule or give me and they it's like, here's our advice, but go to your county prosecutor first. So I think we should reach out first, and then if we don't get clarification, then go to the state.
I think that's fair. If you'd like me to do that, I'd be happy to do that. So I will work on that, and I'll report next month.
And then next, there's going to be two conferences. The first one, the Cleveland Planning and Zoning Workshop. So this is the one that's always held in the fall by the Ohio American Planning Association. It's going to be held at Cleveland State University. Both Allison and I plan to attend. I put in there that it's about $125 per registrant. That keeps going up every year, and it's actually, I just got the notification on it, it's $165 for me and $185 for Allison. So they have increased their cost over time. So it is going to be a little bit more to attend it. It used to be $90 a couple years ago, so it's more than doubled in a short amount of time. And then Allison Miskovas is going to be attending the Ohio GIS Conference next week, September 20th through the 22nd. That's organized by the County Engineers Association. It's going to be just under $1,300 for total travel expenses. And this is the main GIS conference that all the GIS professionals go to each year. So she's going to be learning more about ARC Online and ARC Pro, and then she'll be able to report back to the commission at the October meeting.
And then, so elimination of point of sale septic inspection. I probably could have advised you this maybe a month or so ago, but the County Board of Health voted to end their mandatory point of sale inspections for septic systems, so that was effective June 30th. And I did include their memo that they had released on that. So basically, if your home transfers after 11:59 p.m. on June 30th, the evaluation is not required. So that was a pretty big change in the health department's regulations. And then that's kind of a segue into number 5 on the director's report. So it's related to number 3, but the county subdivision regulations are a priority project for 2022, and it's going to go into 2023. So I've been here 3 years now. I've really had a chance to assess what I think, could be changed, minor changes, major changes. This is a potential major change to the lot split requirements and relating to what is required during review of a lot split, but specifically lots between 5 and 20 acres. It wouldn't be the minor subdivisions, which are 5 acres and less. So at the October meeting, it's my intent to bring in a couple of representatives from Geauga Public Health so that they can give their explanation of how they're involved and what the potential changes could be regarding septic system reviews. So this was just more or less to give you a heads up that this is going to be coming for the next meeting. And then I'll be presenting, I'll have in the packet for you, I'll have some information ahead of time before the meeting. And then budget hearings, they're scheduled for October 4th. I just wanted to, we previously reviewed the budget in May, but I just wanted to give you a courtesy heads up that budget hearings are coming up as well. And that is the budget that was submitted in May. $200,355 was the total request of the county commissioners. And the work summary, so we did 28 different lot splits and consolidations, and then 71 different points of contact for lot splits, miscellaneous inquiries, informal reviews, text amendments, and then we had 3 easements. And then miscellaneous contacts with the townships. These are kind of standard each month, informal review of text amendments, questions about the zoning amendment process. And so if you have any questions, let me know on that, but that's pretty straightforward. And then the last thing is the SEDS. There was a SEDS steering committee meeting on August 5th. That was the last one that was attended by the consultant AR360, and it happened to be the last steering committee. There was supposed to be another one on September 2nd, but it was canceled. And NOACA indicated that they would give a future update regarding the approval of the SEDS by the United States Economic Development Administration. But just as a quick summary of what that August 5th meeting was about, that in the future, that the intent of that group is to develop a economic development subcommittee that would review different, and their duties could include reviewing the SEDS and identifying any federal funding requests. So that's going to be the last meeting I would have to attend regarding that subject matter.
And I think, is this what your email was in relation to? Okay, so I don't know if you want to talk about that now or in a little bit.
We've got a bunch of business, and I hope we want to do it now at the front end, or do it at the tail end, or a lot.
But I just wanted to recognize that I did see that you sent out some communication on that, so that's fine. Okay, thank you, Linda. We're going to move on to the township amendments to be reviewed, which is Munson Township Text Amendment number ZC 2022-02, initiated August 10th of 2022 by the zoning commission.
I'm going to start off with this cover letter that Munson Township submitted. So they submitted this new text amendment, 2022-02. It is the same amendment as 22-01 that was submitted earlier this year, except they left out section 1202.4, which relates to supplementary conditions on variances. So that section is under further discussion, and it's actually on our agenda this morning. But I'm going to just scroll down to the amendment real quick. I'm sorry, this This was all the technical. Okay, so this should look familiar to you. They were just adding a definition of premises to their definition section. We had approved this with just approval with actually, I think we just, yeah, this part of it, since it just, there wasn't anything really controversial or heavy hitting with this one. They were eliminating places of worship from their permitted uses because they're actually a conditional use, taking out forest and wildlife preserves from their permitted uses, and then renumbering accordingly. And then they made that same change throughout their residential districts. So they have 4 residential districts, so they made those changes. And then a couple code corrections where they're here, this should have referred to Article 8 and didn't. So it is the same amendment. An amendment regarding the fence regulations. So it's pretty, it is the same thing that they had submitted before.
Right, so I think this was just something that we've already reviewed, we've already discussed. It's not really anything new at this point. So we would just be seeking a motion to basically approve what we already approved.
Yes.
So I have a question regarding churches and their permitted use versus conditional use. Isn't a conditional use kind of an exceptional thing? And so a permitted use would say we permit churches, and so that would be the regular zoning qualification, whatever you want to call it. Conditional would be kind of an exception. So it's a conditional use because we can't, it's in an area that maybe is, not zoned for that or something like that. So explain to me the difference in your mind between permitted versus conditional use.
So a permitted use here, this is just for an example. So a permitted principal use in a residential area, obviously single-family dwellings, that's the whole intent of the district. And you can allow places of worship as a permitted use,
Right.
but in Munson Township, they're actually conditional uses. So to have it listed here as a permitted use was just an error, because it should, the permitted uses are single-family, public buildings, licensed residential care facilities, and type B family daycare. So those are permitted by right. You could go into the zoning office, apply for your permit, they would give it to you after the review. The conditional use, still a permitted use, but it has to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals for approval. And then they would place any conditions on it that they see fit. So that's the difference. It's still something that's allowed, but it's allowed with conditions that it has to go through that additional review. Like they wouldn't be able to walk into the Munson Township zoning office and apply for a place of worship and then automatically get approval.
So I'm going to raise an interesting idea here. Making a conditional use is a violation of the Constitution of the U.S., the United States. And so I would, if I were somebody applying for a church and somebody forced me to go to a Board of Appeals, I would probably file a constitutional claim because the right of religion is constitutional. And so I'm not sure that that's a proper way to approach that. And I'm just raising that up because I don't know. But just saying, it's either permitted or it's not permitted. If you make it conditional, you're now forcing people who have a religious bent to go through extra steps, and I think that's on shady ground, personally.
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't personally come across the answer to that question in my practice. I don't know if your experience has led you to any kind of insight on that question.
Yeah, the religious land use case definitely can't prohibit them. Now, I would have to research this more with the prosecutor's office. I see where your line of questioning is going, but again, I know some townships allow them as a permitted use and others ones are allow them as a conditional use, depending on how they want to view it.
My only thing, and this is a general comment, not specific to this question, is my only thing is regulating it is not the same thing as prohibiting it. So that might be a distinction that is why it would be allowed, but your point is well taken in that if you're asking people with religious use to go through extra steps, is that
Is that no undue burden?
is that constitutional? I mean, I
Yeah, is that
understand
an
what
undue
your
burden?
question
Is it like banning it, but not? It's a soft banning, if you will, because you make people go through an extra set of steps, and it's hard, and they don't know, they're ignorant of the law, and they don't know what's right or what's not right.
All right, I mean, at first blush, it would appear like, okay, are we trying to prohibit that? But I think, I guess, that's a good question, and we have to look at it. Like I said, generally regulating is not the same as prohibiting, so.
They had to send us back up to the prosecutor's office, correct, for this to come to us? So I know Susan's looked at it, I don't know if anybody else has. But that's a good question. Skip, I always thought you could have a church anywhere you want. I didn't think we could do this. But I understand, Carrie, what you're saying, it's not prohibited, it's,
Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. That's the First Amendment, right? Now, that's Congress, but it could be said
I think that
that
would
local
extend
government is establishing a law, or is creating a law respecting the establishment, the creation of a church, the establishment of a religion. If I were a church, now I'm a very aggressive person, as you guys all know, I would challenge this to court in a heartbeat. And I would take it right to the Supreme Court, because local governments should not be interfering with people who want to establish a religious establishment.
I think it's a really good question. I'm interested to dig into that, so.
By the way, I carry my Constitution with me everywhere.
I'm surprised it's not memorized, I'm a little disappointed.
I wanted to read it so you saw me reading it.
Got it. You don't have your glasses on.
All right.
Are you good? Here again, if you're gonna go talk to the prosecutor, you wanna run this up the flagpole too?
Sure. I know, this is a good question that came up. I mean, it's a wonderful
It's a
question.
good,
And
yeah.
it's also interesting that that's conditional, but at the same time, you have, you're allowing, like, say, the family daycares and stuff like that, so why are they not conditional if you're making the place of worship
Some of those
conditional?
should be conditional before worship, house of worship.
The type B.
Right, yeah.
The type B daycares are the ones that take place inside somebody's home. The type A daycares are the ones that are more commercial use that you see.
But still, sometimes you see churches inside houses, so.
And by the way, this applies to
Exactly.
this applies to the federal government. Read the Ohio Constitution because it has similar language. So if anybody says, well, that's federal, well, yeah, it is, but the Ohio state has similar language in their constitution. So.
Very
Definitely
good.
something to look into, actually, protect Munson more than anything,
Yeah,
you know.
I'm trying to help you.
Thank you. So we're gonna table this?
I mean, you could make a approval modification. Well, it would have to be approval. It's either approved, denied, or approval with modifications.
We could approve it, can't we, with request to,
It would have to be with a recommendation
Right.
to do something that's
Right, to
typically.
modify it some way, and so I'm not sure that we're clear on what we want to modify.
need the place of worship.
So,
How many times is it struck out? 2?
It's in the four, so this is,
404?
Oh, yeah.
it's 4 of them, yeah, and in the residential districts, of the R1 through the R4. So this is a point of, it's a correction because it's listed here as a permitted use. So it's more of a correction to the code because it incorrectly has it listed.
I'm sorry, would you mind one more question? This is a different subject, same zoning.
okay,
So permitted use, forests and wildlife preserves. So we're not permitting forests and
No,
not
that-
permitting wildlife preserves,
They-
right? Is that what we're saying?
So they don't have a definition of forest and wildlife preserve.
okay.
That is an incredibly awful, I have never seen that in any other zoning resolution. Not to say that they can't have it, but that means then you would have to,
Define it,
you
correct?
have to define it first. So I could think of what a forest and wildlife preserve is. You might have a different opinion. So if it's just not defined,
It doesn't
then,
make a sense to leave it as a permitted principal use.
Right.
And I'm wondering, now that we've kind of broached this subject, if it wasn't originally intended that places of worship in the residence, like in a residence, was to be permitted, and that if you wanted to have like a commercial, place of worship, that it was to be a conditional use. Like, I'm wondering if that was their original intent when they drafted the document originally. But now, I think what they were looking at is, it doesn't really fit under residential code. I think this is what we're looking at, their residential.
yes, this is the residential.
And so they didn't think that it fit under that code any longer, and I think that's why they were trying to clean this up. It didn't make sense to have a forest and wildlife preserve in their residential code, like their, that section. But again, to Linda's point, if they're not defining it, that also is confusing.
I would agree, putting forest and wildlife preserves in a housing code is probably goofy.
Yeah.
And I could see striking it just because it's not a permit, I mean, it's not like you're permitting a forest, it's
Right.
there.
Right.
Yeah, because it's not defined.
But
Yeah, and I don't think, that was the intent, of that was not to prevent someone from having a forest. It's a wildlife preserve. What is that? I mean, seriously, when you come down and think about it, is it a fenced-in enclosure, wildlife preserve, that if somebody comes and looks at animals? I mean, you can have all sorts of different opinions on what that means, so, that's why they removed it.
So I guess in the interest of kind of moving forward on this is the options we have. We can either approve it as is, we can approve it with modifications, which would be to not strike places of worship in this section, or we could deny it for the reason that we think that it's, unconstitutional or something along those lines, which I'm not sure that we're positive about right at this moment. So I don't think that, I wouldn't recommend the first or the second, perhaps the first or the third option. I would probably recommend the second option of approval with modification and not striking the,
Places of worship.
That would be my suggestion.
unless there's a problem with that, that you would see.
Yeah, and we can have the discussion about the constitutional right, and we can look into that further. But again, this being a residential district, places of worship as regulated in Article 5. I'm sorry, this is so slow. So this is conditional uses, and it was a matter of correcting the reference.
So Article 5 talks about,
Article 5 talks about conditional uses as well as Article 8. So, these through here, those are conditional use standards, so that's when you go before. Sorry, this is only a partial, this isn't their whole zoning resolution, this is only part of it. Because that list was meant to show the permitted uses in the residential district. What's this statement still? And listing a place of worship in the residential district as a permitted use was an incorrect reference because it's a conditional use. It was more of a correction than anything. Because they're still allowed in the residential district as a conditional use.
so in other words, even if we were to recommend removing the strike-through and allowing that to stay in this section, they still have an entire other code section that says that places of worship are conditional uses. That's the way their code reads.
Right, I can see if I can go on to maybe take that.
Does that make, Jim, does that seem like I'm summarizing that correctly?
I think so.
Okay, so that still leaves this board with the position of either approving it as is, approving it with modifications, or denying it. So I probably would not suggest the denying in this situation. I think we're kind of left with either approving it or approving with modification. Do we have to act on it today or can we table it?
It would just delay, they would have to push their public hearing back.
Munson has a public hearing scheduled for this, that's why they would like to have action by the planning commission, so that's why I would suggest tabling it. Well, let me ask the board, I mean, without actually taking a vote, do we feel like we want to, maybe with a show of hands, do we want to just take action on this today? Or is anyone opposed to that?
I would advocate approving with modifications, regardless of the reference to residential district. It seems odd that they left parks and playgrounds, library, schools, so on and so forth, but they didn't leave places of worship. So approve modifications with your request not to strike places of worship.
Okay.
That would be my motion.
Does that, if we approve with modifications, does that require them to modify it?
No, it is our recommendation to them that we're saying, we noticed this issue, here's the reason why. We would recommend that you don't strike this through. They can still have a public hearing and then make a decision in their community as to what suits their needs.
I did bring up their section 808 places of worship is under conditional uses. So this is under the conditional use section that places of worship may be permitted as conditional use within residential districts. And then the BZA reviews it, so I just wanted to show that it is a permitted use. It was just that particular section where they're striking it is just it's a matter of correcting it.
So why not leave it in there with their, instead of striking it, why not just leave it in there with their?
Because they're saying it's a conditional use and not just an outright permitted use. In other words, it's a process question. You go in, you say, this is permitted, and it gets stamped approved, versus it's a conditional permit application, conditional use permit application. It has to go through a different process.
But what would their logic be for not allowing it to be a permitted use?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Traffic.
Okay.
A lot of it, because in the morning, now,
Traffic.
again, I know there's gonna be a traffic associated with those other uses, so I know and see where you're going with it, with public buildings, there's traffic at public buildings all the time.
So whether it's a conditional or permitted use, nothing changes regarding a church. So why not leave it a permitted use? I mean, if you're gonna make them go through hoops, unconstitutional as it is.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that their zoning code specifically says that places of worship may be permitted as a conditional use within residential districts. So to be consistent, they're saying, well, let's strike it from the list of permitted uses because it's actually a conditional use. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think it's a good question, and we've certainly dug into this a little bit right now, and I think there's more that we can certainly do. I'm going to mention it to the prosecutor's office when I talk to them, but that still puts us in a position of what can we do today as far as our official action.
Well, you had a motion from John, I'm gonna second his motion there. He made it,
Okay, so we have,
we'll follow up with discussion.
okay, so then John made a motion, I'm going to write this down, to approve with modification.
That's correct.
To not strike through
Do
the
not
place of
strike
worship.
place of worship and permitted principal uses.
So-
Yeah, I just, brief commentary.
Sure.
Using an example of the township I live in and my Amish neighbors who have a place of worship in their home, I would agree with Skip's sentiment and Dennis' sentiment that, place of worship is a place of worship. So it's not a conditional use, so, yeah.
Okay.
But my motion's based on it, so thank you.
Very good. So we have the motion and we have the second. So I think at this point I need to take a vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay. So we're going to say the motion passes. That's okay with that.
42 U.S. Code 2000, Katerina.
Yes. 40.
Federal law explicitly protects churches and other religious institutions and individuals from unduly burdensome or discriminatory land use and zoning regulation. After learning that local land use and zoning regulations often place burdens on religious congregations' ability to practice their faith in violation of the U.S. Constitution, Congress enacted the Religious Land Use and Institutional Persons Act of 2000.
Skip, can you send that to Linda that she
Yeah,
can
no,
reference
it's
it?
already LUIPA, I am familiar with it.
Okay.
so.
Thank you.
Because do you verbalize
It-
our vote, or do you just put it
That
in
sounds very
writing?
clear.
Pardon?
Do you verbalize our discussion to the commission, zoning commission, or do you just do it in writing?
I do send the memo in writing, but then I always say if they have any questions to call. So yeah, call or email is always, yeah.
Okay.
So if we already know that there's this code in the books, why are we even having this conversation?
Because we're gonna tell them that the code's in the book.
Yeah, but I mean, this should have been raised up as commentary from our director early.
You know, I would have to look into it further, to be perfectly honest with you. Other townships do allow them as a conditional use.
In violation of federal law.
It's still a permitted use, but with conditions.
In violation of this federal,
Well, that would, so we'd have to look into if it is in violation of that.
I mean, that's an issue, and I'm surprised that it was being, I mean, Linda's not the only person who's looked at this, so,
Yeah.
but that's why we have a planning commission, so, there
Good
we go.
job.
Okay, let's move on to the, unless there's any other comments, I'd like to move on to the Troy Township text amendment, number ZC 2022-03, initiated August 18th of 2022 by the zoning commission, Troy Township.
So this was amending Article 1, and, difficulty here getting this over.
Technology's great until it's not.
Oh, there we go. It didn't want to get back over to my other screen. Okay, so this is section 102, purpose of the zoning resolution. This had come before us back in earlier this year in the spring, in March or April, I believe, and we had proposed a similar amendment, and I believe that never made it through, so they are resubmitting these text amendments. So in this area, and this is kind of hard to read, right around in this area where this section, it says the township may regulate the location, setback, building lines, size of yards, courts, and other open spaces, the density of population, and the uses of land and trade. So right at this word where I have it highlighted, and, they are, the language here in bold, the uses of buildings and other structures isn't included. So I do recommend that they would keep that in their zoning resolution, because that's a pretty general statement, the uses of buildings and other structures. Because this language specifically relates to buildings and structures, and then the second part of this, where it starts the uses of land, that discusses the actual uses of land, so they're two different things. So for whatever reason, that language was not included. And then they had also, earlier this year, they'd indicated tents, cabins, and trailer coaches were purposely left out of this section. This is directly from the Ohio Revised Code. So they had left out language regarding tents, cabins, and trailer coaches because they said that those aren't permitted in the township. So those uses have been left out, but there still are additional references to it, because you see it here, tents, cabins, and trailer coaches, tents, cabins, and trailer coaches, so they're still referring to it elsewhere in that section. So I would, just the recommendation would be for them to review the entire section, as if the intent was to remove tents, trailers, and trailer coaches from the entire section, or just that one line. And then additionally, they are missing language right here where it says in accordance with a comprehensive plan for non-residential number of stories. That language doesn't make any sense. So in the actual Ohio Revised Code, it says for non-residential property only, the height, bulk, number of stories. So there's language missing there. So that's the only recommendation on this article, is to, for those 3 recommendations on that one.
Any questions or comments? This is the same section.
That was the only recommendation in their, oh, no, that was a minor one, sorry.
Well, paragraph.
Yeah, just to include the number 1 after the 1 reference. That's standard, because most of the time they do it in the zoning resolution, but they didn't do it in that particular area. And the rest of the language just was standard language from ORC early model.
So then it would be approval
With modifications.
to adjust that language.
Yes.
Any questions or comments with respect to the director's recommendation on this matter? Okay, so then I would be seeking the board to have a motion to approve with modifications.
I make a motion to approve with modifications.
Jim, thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, motion passes. Okay, we're going to move on to the Troy Township Text Amendment number ZC 2022-04, initiated August 18th of 2022 by zoning commission of Troy Township.
This one is straightforward. I didn't have any recommendations. They're just correcting. They're adding the P1 and the P2 reference, their passive park and active park. For whatever reason, it was never listed in their list of zoning districts, so they're adding it there. And then they're making a few references, changing township clerk to fiscal officer. So minor, but there aren't any recommendations on this one.
Okay. So, comments or questions? Otherwise, I'd be seeking a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And I would need a second. Beat you to it, Dennis. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving on to the Troy Township Text Amendment number ZC 2022-05, initiated August 18th of 2022 by the zoning commission of Troy Township.
Okay, so this amendment specifically relates to their B1 general commercial district. I do have a map later on, but that's mainly the center of town there in Troy. So first off, the proposed language to section 403.1, their principal permitted building structures and uses. They're adding an additional statement that says there shall be no more than one principal permitted use on a lot. First is just a general comment. Since this is just the title itself, it's kind of an odd location for that language, and it really should just be a sentence below section 403.1. Some of their sections are formatted like that, some of them aren't. So that was just a more or less a formatting recommendation that it be below the title. But as far as the language itself, there shall be no more than one permitted principal use on a lot. My comment over here is that a general rule, commercial districts generally permit more than one building on a lot or more than one use on a lot. So this language is pretty straightforward, but the recommendation to the township is to consider the impacts of that language, because that just permits one use per lot. So, which is rather restrictive for a non-residential district.
So, a comment then, if you don't mind. I think they're opening themselves up for legal issues. And so our comment back to them should be a little stronger maybe than the comment that you made, because as you said, I can think of a dozen commercial district-related uses that are, where a lot's got more than one permitted use.
Absolutely.
And so they can't restrict that. I mean, that would be burdensome and create a legal issue for them. And so if we want to give them good advice, we ought to say, set yourself up, guys. And by the way, it's really hard to enforce. So if you're going to create zoning rules, it should be something easily enforced.
I think one of the things that we had looked at was, is this the township where the zoning affects the entire parcel? I think
This area is not split zoned, so
No,
this,
it's not.
this is the full parcel is zoned commercial.
And so a lot of times what we've seen in Geauga County is that, and I suppose in other places as well, but we'll see commercial zoning and other type of zoning on the same parcel, whereas the way that they have worked it is that it affects the entire parcel. So you might have very large parcels off of the main road that are entirely commercial, and what they're saying is you can only have one use for this entire parcel, which is unusual and highly restrictive.
Very restricted.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but let's say that somebody wants to have a residence on a commercial lot.
Yeah, that would, I guess, not be allowed, but according to this.
They do, coincidentally, they do, Troy is one of the townships that actually does allow,
They do allow it.
but if it's only the one principal use, so if you have a home, a single-family detached home, then you wouldn't be allowed to have a commercial use.
Well, but they do commercial uses in Troy, and they have residents on commercial property. And so, I mean, it's an after the fact kind of thing. The home is there first. They decided they want to convert it to commercial, so they make it commercial, but they still have the home, they haven't taken it down.
So those kind of situations would be legal non-conforming if this was, is that, or am I?
Yeah, if they built a new commercial building, say there was a house there first.
Yeah, it's residential property. They zoned it commercial because they wanted to put their trucking business there, but their home's still there. So,
I mean, this wouldn't, the way that language is written, it wouldn't allow this one use regardless. So it is restrictive, that's why I had put that language there. The impacts of it are pretty substantial.
Don't some of their commercial places have like apartments above them and stuff to that extent, so they would just be like non-conforming now?
yeah, but again, they set themselves up for a real big challenge relative to enforcement and/or challenge. Okay.
Let's dig in this a little bit more.
And then the next comment, so we're under the list of permitted uses, they're striking automobile sales and service facilities. So the purpose of the B1 district, it is right up here, but I'm gonna read what I wrote in yellow. Is the purpose of the B1 district is a development of small retail and service establishments to serve the daily shopping and service needs of the growing township population. So automobile sales and service facilities fall under retail sales and service, so the staff would recommend that these two uses be left in. So commercial district, that's where those types of uses are typically found. And they're not permitted elsewhere in the district, or in the township. So that's a pretty significant change. I'm just gonna run through these real quick. Single-family detached dwellings, they do allow them in their B1 district. When this was before us before, I had recommended, because this specifically says retail business establishments limited to the following. A single-family home is not a retail business, so it should be relocated to other buildings and structures. So that was the recommendation from before. They had actually recommended, they had moved that to a different section because they realized that a home is not a retail use. But for whatever reason, with this amendment, they put it back in under 403.1A. So that's a recommendation that go back to item D, number 6. And then, I'm not, anything that doesn't have a yellow highlight was just a comment, and I'm going to go over that. But this one.
Go ahead, because I was just going to mention that one.
So, and then, but this, I didn't have a yellow highlight on this one because there's technically no recommendation on it, but trucking and transportation, they had added that some time ago in 2019 as a permitted use in their commercial district. The planning commission had voted to deny the amendment. Now they're coming back through and removing trucking and transportation as a permitted use in the B1 district. It is a more appropriate use for an industrial district, in which they do have an industrial district. They're not proposing that as part of this amendment, but they're simply removing trucking and transportation from their general business
Linda,
district.
I feel that was just this past year, wasn't that?
2019.
I don't feel it was that long ago. We
It was-
just had that discussion. I know it says 2019 here, but I feel like that just recently happened, just,
It just seems like yesterday.
It was 2019.
But it was 19.
because we made that suggestion, because we were talking about that area, like, say, up by Rosefield Inn and stuff, saying, well, if they do the whole thing, you know, they're gonna allow it everywhere. So now that they allowed it, now they wanna take it back out right away? So what if somebody actually bought land with the thought, now it's allowed, just like a year ago or so, and now they're just gonna change it right back when they just changed it? It kind of to me, it leaves the impression that they changed it maybe for a specific person, and now that maybe that person's there, they're changing it back. That's the impression it leaves, but.
It came before the commission originally for Lone Wolf Transportation on Main Market Road. And
That was in 19?
so
Because I feel like it just happened.
before I started here, that the owner of that applied for a text amendment and ended up getting denied. And then later, the trustees came back in with an amendment to add trucking and transportation to the B1 district and rezone those two parcels to where Lone Wolf Transportation is located, and then also an adjacent
The one next
residential
to
property,
it
the one
was
next
surrounded
to
by
it.
Akron land.
So that's what, so now that was, so that got added to the code and rezoned. So now what this is doing is removing trucking and transportation as a permitted use. So anybody that's there and operating is gonna have to be a legal non-conforming use, and anytime they want to expand, they're gonna have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
And that was in 19 we did that.
Yes.
So everybody that bought
Move on,
land,
Dennis, you're getting old,
Yeah.
forgot.
I feel like that just happened this past year, but yeah.
Yeah, but Linda, I'm surprised about that. Any lawful existing trucking and transportation use will become a non-conforming. If they change the rules, then it applies to the existing? Wow,
Yeah, that's,
doesn't seem fair.
it doesn't.
It's the way it has to be handled, because otherwise they have to fall under some regulation, and if it's not a listed permitted use anymore, then it falls under the legal non-conforming.
So let's go back to Lone Wolf, who they changed it and he got approved. Now, what does he have to do to stay there? He's got to reapply with their ZBA to,
No, it
Is
was, he can operate as is. It's not a conditional use. It's not like he has to come back every 5 years.
okay.
It is, well, I shouldn't mention that because that's another conditional use regulation. It's, he was lawfully, I'm assuming he was lawfully permitted, so any ones that are lawfully existing can continue to exist. Okay, there's a lot in this one, so we know what it is. Yeah, move through it. And then I have the same comment here as far as format. This is a very long title, and then they're adding a zoning certificate is required unless otherwise indicated. Again, it's minor, but I think it's odd to have all that language in the title block and not just as a separate paragraph below it. So that's the recommendation there, that that language be moved to a separate sentence below the title. The caveat with that is that same formatting would have to be done throughout their zoning resolution, and it's kind of a mix right now. That recommendation is just for consistency only. Same comment there, move that out of the title and down below. This comment, that they just needed to correct the numbering. Okay, so now this one, they're adding a dwelling in a building with a permitted commercial use shall conform with all the applicable regulations of the B1 zoning district. So this is somewhat conflicts with their previous section that says only one use is permitted per lot.
I don't even know, are you talking about is this sentence 4?
No, 6.
But both of those last two sentences, 4 and 6, where's 5?
Yeah, the numbering's wrong, so one should be 4, the other
4
one
and
should be
5.
5.
So both of those are very confusing. There should be no more than one dwelling unit in a building, dwelling being a residential unit. I don't know what, did they define dwelling? With a permitted commercial use. So dwelling and commercial use conflicts with what they said before. And what if you've got multifamily in a commercial building? I mean, this is extremely fraught with issues. And is a multifamily dwelling not a commercial dwelling?
No, I mean, definitely, going back to the statement that only one use is permitted per lot, that seems to be contradictory to that.
So B1 zoning district, that is their
That's their commercial.
commercial district.
So they allow dwellings in that district,
But only one dwelling.
but only one dwelling,
And if you have a dwelling, you can't have a business.
and you can't have a business.
You only need one use per lot, basically.
So you can't have an apartment above your garage.
I mean, that's the way I see it.
And, well, yes, and to Linda's point, it's kind of, it is contradictory to, because they're in number 6, which is, should be number 5. They are specifically saying there's a commercial use, there's a permitted commercial use, and there's a dwelling unit in that commercial use, which they're also adding language that says you cannot have more than one.
Use.
More than one use. So you're right on with that.
I mean, it is listed under the conditional
Yeah.
uses, but it's still, yeah, no. it,
Given what I'm seeing here, I'm
They-
moving to deny until they clean this up.
So this is under conditional uses, that a dwelling unit in a building with a permitted commercial use is subject to the following conditions. So.
Do we want to go through the rest of it? or
Yeah,
just-
we can go through, no, I,
Skip just made a motion to deny, so I don't know if we can, is that a formal motion?
We can go through the rest.
Okay.
I'll come back to
So then,
Yes, you make it.
it. You seconded.
this is a formatting issue, so this was done kind of differently throughout, so I'm just gonna reference hotels and motels. C1, and then A through D is their formatting, but under nursing homes and residential care facilities, they don't have a 1 there, so they need to include that. And then their formatting is different than childcare. And formatting of this is very important. So G, there's no 1, and then now these are numeric instead of alphabetical. So that's the recommendation, to go through their entire section and make sure that the formatting is the same. Because if it's, formatting can make things confusing enough as it is. And then, same thing here for consistency. In all the other ones, like in hotels and motels, conditions, a motel or hotel, so they refer to both of them, shall conform with the B1 zoning, but here they're adding residential care facilities, but they didn't add it here. And then, this is under gasoline service stations. This is another one that is very heavy hitting. They are taking out servicing and repair, which is very odd because servicing and repairing of vehicles, again, is a typical use in a commercial district. So the recommendation is that they consider how removing these uses will impact the residents and the businesses because they're not allowed elsewhere in the district.
No mechanics allowed in front.
So, so I've made the point up here, removing those would not allow, at least the way I'm reading it, traditional oil changes, tire rotations, and things of that nature. This section, again, keep in mind, this is the gasoline service stations are still gonna be allowed, a gas station is still allowed. Usage shall be limited to the sale of motor fuel, so again, what you're getting at the gas pump, and then striking out all the other ancillary things, but that's, if a gas station wants to sell motor oil or windshield wiper fluid, you should be able to do that. So
They can't even
that's,
sell what do you call those, air freshener, I guess, because that takes from the air of your car, right?
And then also, if the township removes servicing and repair from this definition, another recommendation was that they would have to review section 601, number of parking spaces, because automotive repair and service stations are still listed there. So that's something that they would have to look at. Okay, yeah, that was my other comment of that they consider revising that, because that would be very limiting as to what the gasoline service station could actually sell.
I saw something in their setbacks there too, was,
Yes, that's the next, that is coming up.
oh, I'm jumping ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so vehicle sales, this is another thing, they're striking car sales lots from the B1 commercial district. So again, vehicle sales is another typical commercial use. Their definition of vehicle is all encompassing though. It says anything, everything which is or has been on wheels, runners, or tracks. So they're taking out vehicle sales, but I would still possibly recommend at least automobile sales, passenger vehicles and lawn equipment sales, to at least retain some.
But they haven't indicated if they're gonna be doing that.
No, they are proposing to strike that all from the code. That was just another formatting related comment that kind of goes back up to another comment.
So that wheels, runners, or tracks, would that be considered like snowmobiles, like, so somebody can't have like a little place that sells
Bicycles?
Right.
buggies,
Scooters.
riding lawnmowers?
They've changed their definition of vehicle, or change it to allow something. Okay, and then we keep scrolling here because they did change their setback. Okay, this is where they're changing the setback from, this is their front yard setback from 75 feet to 100 feet. So a lot of townships have around a front yard setback in the commercial district of around 75 to 80 feet. So their existing regulation isn't outside the realm of possibility of normal. Neither is 100 feet. Other townships have a 100-foot setback off their main arterials. Chester Township, Newberry Township are the two that I can think of off the top of my head that do have around 100 feet or more setback. But in this district, I want to get to my map. Let me get over.
Are they planning on grandfathering in, because like Hirsch's Mini, I don't know what it's called now, America, it's there. That's like right on the road, and their gas pumps are right there. It's been there forever.
Oh, so the way that, my understanding is that they basically are like grandfathers, right?
Okay.
But if they were to make any kind of changes or additions, they would have to be in compliance, right? Which would be very difficult.
So they couldn't upgrade their building, because then everything they have there would be non-compliant.
It depends on how strict they want to be, but yes.
So this is why I had Ms. Cobus prepare this map, because it was a good visual. So 75 feet is the required front yard setback now. So the dashed line is the 75-foot setback. So you will see actually pretty much every single building in and around that area already is non-conforming. They're already close to the street.
Even their fire department.
So, and I mean, there are some buildings that are fully within, like this is fully within the 75-foot setback. That's fully within the 75-foot setback. Again, and then the yellow area is the 100-foot setback. So just between that dash line and where the yellow meets the pink is the 100-foot setback. So it's not a matter of changing it from 75 feet to 100 feet will automatically make now everything non-conforming. Everything's already non-conforming. So it becomes more of an issue of the aesthetics. How do they want their commercial district to look? Do they want the buildings closer to the street, or do they want them further back? 25 feet isn't much more further back, but you have some properties like this one or that one, they're enormous. They're not going to have a problem meeting the 100-foot setback. But there are a lot of small lots in and around this area, and I think in my memo I had mentioned the lot size is like from 0.2 acres all the way up to 39 acres. So the lot size varies significantly in this zoning district. So it really comes down to, I think it's more of like what they want their commercial district to look like. pushing the buildings further off the road does impact that.
In the future though, because
In the
everything's
future.
existing today, so
Right.
them changing it by 20 feet changes nothing today, or for the next 20 years probably.
Right.
So I'm not sure what they're trying to accomplish there, so.
And we didn't show the commercial district, there is more of the commercial district further west over here, but we just focused on the main, what you see there in pink, pinkish red is the B1.
Is the
commercial
big
district.
one on the top left up there, is that the driving range, I'm thinking?
I think so, yeah. So we wanted to show you that to show all the buildings are already mostly non-conforming to that 75-foot setback.
So if somebody just bought that and wanted to do something trucking, or now they want to change that, because I think that just sold, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, really?
They're the other one next to it.
Sorry, so that was the setback, and the same thing goes for accessory, this one, see comments in 403.6, they're changing that front yard setback from 75 feet to 100 feet for their, I think it's their accessory uses. Lost my space when I know where that now. Bear with me here for a second. Sales. Oh, and then this is the buffer zone. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, 100 feet. And then additionally, their buffer zone, right now they have a buffer zone of 100 feet. Whenever a residential district abuts a commercial district, they're proposing to increase that to 150 feet. I don't feel that that's completely necessary, but recommend that the township consider the basis for increasing the setback. 100 feet. And the intent of the buffer zone is to buffer the residential use from the commercial uses. So 100 feet, within 100 feet, to be able to do some sort of land, retain the existing landscaping, put in professional landscaping, mounding. It should be more than enough room to buffer from noise, dust, light, all those sorts of things. So 150 feet is even then more restrictive. So the staff would recommend to keep that at 100 feet. Exterior display or sales. So they're proposing to prohibit several uses, including exterior displays and storage areas within the proposed 150 feet buffer zone. It's just, this language is confusing to me. That same section, the new proposed language says, except as may otherwise be provided in this resolution. So it gives you the, I would recommend that exception statement be reviewed in conjunction with 403 with this section. I'm sorry, this is kind of hard to explain because this is all.
Linda, did they consult
Here,
with
so-
you at all before they did all this?
No.
work? I mean, coming back to Skip's motion.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So this, I'm sorry, I had to scroll back.
Deny
to
it and
the
send it back.
Buffer zone, so there, no structures, buildings, accessory uses, buildings, parking, and then they're adding this language, driveways, display of goods, merchandise, sale, storage shall be permitted in a buffer zone, except as may otherwise be provided. So that kind of makes you think, oh, it's allowed somewhere else in the zoning resolution where this distinctly says it's not allowed. And then when you get down to this section, exterior sales display of goods shall not be located with any off-street parking, loading spaces, or driveways, but it doesn't reference buffer zones, so these aren't allowed in that area. So it just, I think there's potentially somewhat of a conflict there.
Can I comment? It seems to me like there's something coming into Troy that in a hurry they're trying to change this or add to it or make some changes to keep that from coming into Troy. It's just my impression.
It's possible, I haven't heard anything, but it's possible. Let me go through. So I had several.
I heard, but I didn't verify that, like I said, that one property might have sold and might have been, somebody might have been looking at it for trucking, but
Hmm.
now they're banning it again, so.
Madam Chair, is at some point in time the preponderance or the number of recommendations or changes wouldn't
Exceeds
it exceeds kind of a limit that says, okay, it is time to say no, go back and redo this because there's just too many changes.
You could just take a minute and go over my thoughts on that. I know Linda has more that she wants to go over with us because she's done her diligence in going through this and finding issues for us to really pinpoint some areas of concern or areas that need attention, right? So, as the planning commission, again, we can approve with modifications, or deny. And we rarely deny unless there is a tremendous amount of things that we believe are not done correctly, or I think that in the handful of years that I've been a part of this board, I think we've only denied maybe 3, maybe 4 times max. And it usually is a situation where there's something that really is erroneous, or it just seems like there's so many changes or problems with the document that it doesn't seem that an approval would be great. I will say that when we reserve that denial for situations, we have been, in the past, we send a letter that simply says, the planning commission has denied it. And we don't go in through all of the reasoning and explanations because it is, the minutes from our meetings show all of the things that we've discussed. And I don't think that it's really Linda's job to write a comprehensive letter as part of our action. Our formal action is that we've denied it. And what I have noticed is that the townships really don't appreciate that because they're simply getting a denial letter and they don't understand why, and they have to wait for our minutes to be approved because they're not posted right away, and so it's like a month later and these sort of things. So my thinking and my thought process on this, and certainly I'm one person here, but we should reserve a denial for really, how should I say, like it has to be like an extreme situation. The best, I think, is to make that approval with modifications, and that's why Linda spent so much time in going through and making her comments and saying, this is what I recommend, this is what I recommend, because that way we can make that approval with modifications, and now they have a running list of all the things that we've considered and what they should change. And they still have their hearing, and they still have to go through their process at the township level, and hopefully they would make those changes. That being said, as she alluded to in the past, in 2019, we actually did deny the trucking and transportation amendment to their proposed, and they went through, the trustees then went through and actually added it to their zoning resolution anyway. So they simply have the power to do it, even though our recommendation was not to proceed with that, because we saw that this was a potential issue for them. That being said, I think that the approval with modification is a nice, clear way of showing all of the things that we're pinpointing and saying, this is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be done. So I wouldn't rush to a denial, but to the point of, like, if there is something really that meets that, like, standard of, like, erroneous or so problematic, then I think that we reserve the denial for that. And that's my opinion, and that would be my suggestion. Otherwise, certainly the board can act as we deem appropriate.
I have a couple comments.
Yes.
I think Troy Township's always been connected with transportation. I mean, especially since they wanted the 2019, the trucking and transportation implemented. A lot of people have bought property for trucking and transportation for that purpose. And even before that, people bought property to get a variance or conditional use and stuff like that for trucking. And I'm going to read this from our comprehensive plan. Troy Township was a township government that was established in 1820, and the township was named Welshville. 50 acres of land were to be given to the township by Welsh under the condition that the township be named after him. Within several years, citizens petitioned to change the name to the community of Welshville to Troy. Shops were established by wagon makers, shoemakers, copperers, tanners, blacksmiths, carpenters, and masons. Agriculture, however, was the primary component of Troy's economic base. Dairying was undertaken by a large number of farmers. Cheese factories were established as a result of the large dairy industry, with subsequent changes in the transportation and production of technologies, and factories eventually disappeared. Nonetheless, agriculture was remained a significant element in the community. The Sugar Falls Electric Railroad, Eastern Electric Railroad, completed a line between Sugar Falls and Middlefield in 1900, and between Steele's Crossing and Garrettsville the following year. All through, the portion of the line between Steele's Crossing and Middlefield was abandoned due to competition from the Cleveland and Eastern Electric Railway. The line that ran through Troy to Garrettsville remained in operation of a number of years. This established farmers to transport milk to Cleveland in the morning and the producers to the city in the afternoon. The rail service remained operational until 1915, at which time it was terminated due to financial hardships resulting from a decrease in services. Ohio Route 16, running through Troy and now known as U.S. Route 422, introduced the enforced concrete road to Geauga County in November of 1922. Of great importance to the township was the change of its social makeup, which began in 1890, which then the first members of that was developed into a sizable old order Amish population settled in Troy. And Troy has great companies like St. Gobain, Duramax, Marina, Electrolux, and Great Lakes Cheese. The only thing that I could agree with your recommendations is the buffer zone changed to 100 feet instead of 150. And with that, I would lean towards deny. Troy is transportation.
I personally, I think Dan kind of hit it when he said, it almost seems like they have a specific purpose of changing it. Just like they pushed that whole truck thing, we originally denied it. Had they just went along with that originally, we wouldn't be in this situation. But if people have fought with that purpose, and now, and they just, I don't know, they just did road work by the river down there, you know, widen that out, straighten that out, they're doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden now they wanna, it's almost like they wanna slap somebody in the face and go back the other way. I don't know, it's just something weird.
If you don't
Sure.
mind. So, in reference to your comments relative to denial and approval of modification, so on and so on and so on, I mean, I reflect back on why this board exists. This board exists to be a check in the system for residents of our county, holistically, and to try and maintain some consistency across the county. And so we're a county-wide planning commission, so we're to look at the bigger picture and to provide some guidance. And townships are free to make the decisions they want to make. We can make a denial, and they can choose to move forward anyway, regardless of our recommendations, so on and so forth. So I think the bar exists for denial when things are so muddy and when they're trying to make zoning changes that it would confuse the dickens out of the residents and/or create a conflict or a problem for the residents. I think this crosses that bar. I think that they should go back, revisit where they're at. I mean, I understand what they're trying to accomplish, and I give them their due, their fair due on what they're trying to accomplish. I just think that they need to do a little more work on it. So I would reinstitute my motion to deny at this point in time.
Thank you.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to deny on the table by Skip and seconded by Jim.
Can I just speak one thing before we vote?
Sure.
So, and based on what you said, and I know we kind of went through this with Auburn, so if you do a denial, you don't give them any recommendations
No, it's just a letter that says recommend denial. Now, they can call me or email me if they want to.
And why wouldn't we give them recommendations?
Okay, I think, has that been something that we've talked with the prosecutor about?
Yeah.
The prosecutor has basically said we cannot provide modification, recommendations for modification if our official action is to deny.
Okay, so let me respond to that, if you don't mind, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And I apologize, go ahead. First of all, the prosecutor is our advisor. We don't work for the prosecutor. The prosecutor works for us. So the prosecutor advises, we consider the advice, and then we do as we think appropriate. In this situation, I would think it's wholly appropriate for us, if we deny, to give those recommendations over to Troy to help them. We're here to help, we're not here to create a problem. And so we should give them the recommendation, say, look, we're denying because this is muddy, and you guys need to clean this up, and you need to, try it again and bring it back to us, and we'll so I think in this case, it's bad advice from the prosecutor. I'd love to hear from the prosecutor if he's got an argument why that would be legally or create a problem or whatever. I'd love to hear from him on that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that if you're denying, then that's your official action, and I guess we don't have to provide reasons why we're denying, and we don't have to provide reasons why we would approve, but if we have approval with modification, we have to provide those modifications. So they're just trying to keep the official action to be like consistent across the board. So I've, in the past, I've told Linda to put on that motion, or excuse me, on the letter of denial, that they need to contact our office and that we're obviously available to communicate the reasons for and an explanation of, because typically I would say, well, provide them a copy of the minutes, because they'll see all the discussions we had. Is your report? Yeah, so even the memorandums are part of the minutes, so they would be able to see very clearly all the things that we
I'm sorry, no, that is not
Oh.
part of it, just what the township submitted.
Just what they submitted.
Yes,
Okay.
and then the meeting minutes are the discussion.
Could we table it and Linda contact it? I mean, she's obviously worked her butt off on this, and with there's a lot of good points that she's brought up. Is there a way we could not vote on this today, and then maybe you make contact with them and then see how they're,
So,
or is that not the
so
proper
yeah,
way?
no, with what
Yes.
the chairwoman had said, again, it's either approve, you don't talk why you approved it, deny it, you don't talk about why you denied it. The approval with modification is the go-between. Now, I know Commissioner DeVore had mentioned about the trucking and transportation. That was one thing that they're striking it out because they are in, there is a manufacturing district in Troy, further west where Great Lakes Cheese is located. That's potentially an appropriate use for a manufacturing area. In the B1 district, that's their commercial, strictly looking at it from a planning and zoning point of view, their purpose statement is for retail sales and convenience of the residents. So trucking and transportation kind of falls outside of that. An alternative is, this is a very large general commercial district. They could change it, it would be more, they could have a town center commercial district, and then the outlying areas could be more of the general commercial. That's what, when you have such a large expanse of commercial land and you add uses, then that's what, it might be fine for one area, but it might not be palatable in another. So there's other things that they could do. They could create another commercial zoning district. That's a lot more work, a lot more public involvement. I do think the approval with recommendations is a more palatable approach, because then it gives whether my memo is 1 page long or 3 pages long, it doesn't matter to me, because what I'm going to do is then copy and paste all those comments directly into the memo that is sent to the township. But the trucking and transportation, I know at least Commissioner DeVore commented that Troy is transportation. But that's one piece of that entire amendment.
Yes, that's a good point. I think there's a lot of things that have been brought up, and right now we have a motion to deny on the table that was made and seconded. To kind of go back to some of the comments though, I remember kind of having this conversation back in 2019 about, do they realize that this is going to affect their entire commercial district? And that was one of the reasons why we denied it. And I don't know if we sent a detailed letter at that point to Troy or not, when we made that motion to deny. But perhaps in this circumstance, it would be a good idea to send them all of our reasonings and say, look, these are the reasons why we denied it at this time. If these were addressed, then we would consider it further. I don't know how.
We might have at that time, so, I mean, if this isn't to say that I couldn't do the denial letter with a bunch of recommendations, again, I guess,
It's just
talk to
not
the prosecutor,
typical.
it's not typical.
Right.
I guess I'm a little surprised about that. I thought when we sent that denial to Auburn, we would send our, this is why we denied it. But I guess I'm a little surprised that we didn't. I didn't know that.
No, and that's, so then with Auburn, I did talk to the zoning commission.
Because he picked up.
Because Katerina had asked me to reach out, so I did,
Yeah.
sent the denial letter, but then ended up following up with the zoning commission. Secretary had probably like a 20-minute long conversation with her. And then coincidentally, Auburn actually did take some of the planning commission's recommendations
Right.
that weren't formally in a letter.
So I guess if you, whether we deny it or approve with recommendations, the outcome can still be the same, because they can just say, so I'm almost originally leaning towards denial, but then I'm almost maybe leaning towards an approve of recommendation, because at least that way we send all of our thoughts over there, and you would hope that they don't have to take anything we say. You know, they don't have to just say, too bad, just like they did last time, they said we're gonna pass it. So, other recommendation, if we did approve of recommendation, I would like to add on that I don't think they should be striking the transportation thing that they pushed through. It's been there a couple years, because I think people have made moves with that in mind. And that would be another recommendation I would suggest if I was gonna approve the recommendation. So I guess the way I look at it, maybe either way, they can do what they want. But at least if we do the recommendations, they're gonna see how we feel, the public sees how we feel, and our suggestions to how to, you know, what we think's best for the county. If that makes sense.
I think there's so many moving parts here that, you know, I strongly would deny, and then Linda wants to send them a letter for their zoning people to come in and have a meeting with her at her office here, that's fine. Or have a meeting in here. Explain all the topics, it's not right, it's not.
So Katerina, does the legal liability change if we deny versus, because if we see problem and we approve it, now we're part of the problem.
Right.
Okay, so now it gets approved, and
It's
people say,
versus
I'm gonna sue
denied
because this is
versus-
muddy, and I'm gonna sue the planning commission because you approved it.
Well,
And so,
I mean, I hope it certainly wouldn't come to that, but there's always that possibility, because we either approved it or we denied it, right? Those words carry very different weight. And so if we see that there's this potential, you said liability or like harm that we see to the residents or people that did that, maybe that's the reason why a denial is appropriate.
you know, the one thing, and I do differ with Dennis and Commissioner a little bit, it's up to them what they choose their future to be. Truck, it's not my call whether they want trucking, don't want trucking. And they can switch their mind every other month. I don't live there. If I was a resident, I'd be raising hell. But I'm not a resident there. I'm just wanting to make sure the residents there are treated fairly and that they have good zoning code. That's our whole purpose.
Right. So I'm going to go back, because we have a motion to deny on the table, and it was seconded. I think that we need to take a vote on that. We've had nice discussion on it. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and move forward on the motion to deny. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, the motion to deny passes. And I would actually follow up with, I would recommend that this board maybe authorize Linda to follow up with Troy Township in the same way that we did with Auburn and talk to the planning commission. If they would like to have, a meeting with us, whatever the case.
I agree 100% with that.
So we're gonna move on to old business.
Before we move on, is there, this might be something, that- and I know we talked about it before, the informal review process of these amendments that come in from these different zoning commissions. I know some townships do the informal. Is there a way that, I mean, a lot of these comments would have been presented to the township with that informal, because it's an informal review. And I know the word informal means not required, but is there a way that maybe we can look at in the future, making that a required step? You know, that they sent in for a preliminary review, and I don't, you know, I know it's beneficial in my community or on the zoning commission, when we send it in, those comments that we get back, we review and take that into account. And I don't think, according to what I understood, Linda, this didn't come in for any kind of informal, did it?
No.
Okay.
They have in the past, but.
Yeah.
You're right on, and that's something that I was underscored in the conversation with them, say, you know, the informal review process will eliminate a lot of this, and they,
I mean, some of the minor formatting, and again, a lot of what they did was formatting issues, which is, you know, really heavy-hitting material, but as far as it being required, I don't believe we can do that, because that's strictly in the Ohio Revised
Mhm.
Code, that it be sent to us for review, for approve, deny, or approval with modifications. It doesn't go into the informal
Understand.
review.
Yeah, just a way to look at it, a
Right.
recommendation somewhere in there, because this information that is here is, you know, that zoning commission that may be there may not have been all enticing from 2019 and didn't understand, or wasn't, you know, I know the trustees aren't all the same. I think there might be one trustee from 2019, potentially, maybe two, but just in that area, just the informal process from staff, this review has been very beneficial, right? So.
thank you, that's a good point. All right, we're gonna move on to old business. Thank you, Linda, for your work on that one. We're gonna start with the, we have here pay grade update, no new material.
And then I literally, and then, yeah, so we don't have anything on that way, but I'm assuming we're gonna potentially talk about that at the next meeting, depending on what comes in on the agenda.
Can I just make that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did meet with Craig Swenson. He was really kind in sharing with me what he's developed for Job and Family Services, which is one of the bigger agencies for the Geauga County. He has a lot of employees, and he was trying to struggle with the pay grade formula, how it was working for Geauga County. And so he went out and actually put a lot of hours into developing something new, and he shared that with me, and I forwarded it to Linda, and I said, we have a lot on this agenda. So I kind of told Linda, how about like for the holidays, we'll sit down, we'll go through this. So coming up, you will expect to take a look at what they have, and maybe see if that's something that we want to implement for the Planning Commission, instead of using maybe a more difficult system that the county has currently. And I think the county is looking into streamlining their system, their pay grade information as well. So I have that, I've shared it with Linda, and that will be coming to you in the months to come. The next item is the Dechar subdivision. Again, no new material on that.
As of yesterday, sorry, I
Okay.
added this just as a blurb here. I did email the developer. Again, we had found that he was actually marketing one of these lots. So I had contacted him and said that it hasn't been approved or recorded, and he did indicate that he visited the health department yesterday to get it coordinated for that additional septic approval. So he is anticipating it being reviewed at the October meeting.
Okay, good. Model zoning.
Okay, so I know I missed the last planning commission meeting, and I apologize for that, and I know Commissioner Member McCaskey had wanted section 1002.5 of the model zoning added to the agenda, so I added it here. So this is the section of the county model that talks about supplementary conditions on variances. So Auburn had proposed a change to their section relative to this, and then Munson did as well. The initial request, or the initial response from the prosecutor's office was to remove it, but they are currently reconsidering that about adding additional language to make it clearer instead of removing the language.
Who is that? Who's they?
Susan.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I'm hoping I will have something at the October meeting. I don't think it's going to be a huge substantial change. I did include in my memo, there is a case from Chester Township back to 1983, Powerall versus Chester Township, that was kind of the foundation for this, that a township can't put restrictions on a variance that basically creates new law. So I provided the summary of that in my memo, but if you actually want that case, and then there have been several others after that refer back to the Powerball case. So that's kind of the basis for that section of the model that says, hey, you can't.
back real quick?
Sure.
And I looked at that as well, and I thought, okay, well, it pretty much just says there exactly what would have to be stated, that the board is not free to impose its will on an applicant, right? It says it is limited to only when those specific conditions are included in the zoning regulation. That's the limitation. So they cannot choose to do other conditions that are not already in the zoning code.
Now, what's interesting is, and what's important about, oh my gosh, what is this thing doing this? I can't get back to the right page. Sorry, give me a minute, I'm getting annoyed. Okay, all right. So in here, so may provide such supplementary conditions which are reasonably related to the requested variance. So that is extremely important, because you could have something in your zoning resolution. Let's say your sign has to be in good repair, because we just reviewed that section of the model. Your sign has to be in good repair at all times. So say an applicant comes in and they're a commercial business and they want to do an addition and it's too close to the property line. So then that Board of Zoning Appeals can't say, oh, we'll grant your side yard setback variance if you redo your sign.
Or just plant 10 trees.
No, that possibly could be.
It possibly could be.
That
It all
possibly
depends
could
on how everybody's written.
Right.
What can you limit?
Right.
So, you know, hours of business, dust, light pollution. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at it as a point of saying, give the BZA what specifically we think, because it's still in our model zoning, correct?
Yes.
So our model zoning is still wrong.
Well,
But the townships are looking to try to fix theirs, so we kind of got the chicken before the egg here. We got to fix this.
well, coming in with a laundry list of what they're allowed is going to be almost impossible, because you might miss something. So that's why it's generally related and are specifically authorized by this resolution. So that kind of generically refers back to the whole resolution. So the prosecutor's office wanted to maybe add some additional language on that, but the point is reasonably related to the requested variance. If it's a side yard setback for a building, the BZA can't say, we'll approve that as long as you improve your sign. So, because that's not reasonably related to the variance, even though it's in the zoning resolution. So, yeah, more to come.
It's a lot of discretion for
Yes.
the board to have to figure out what they have to
What's
do.
reasonable and what's not.
Right.
So, but if anybody wants the Powerall case, I can forward it to you. But that was just, I know we wanted to discuss it, so I wanted to put that down.
Can we move forward on updating our model zoning based on what we know? So that way the townships,
That particular
Have
section
it
or the whole thing in general?
well, the supplementary conditions on variances, because if it's in the model zoning, like Jim was saying, can we update it based on, like, can we even annotate it and say, here's what the case says, this is the language that needs to be looked at by our, that's being looked at by our prosecutor, here's what the planning commission thinks. I mean, I feel like if the townships are saying, okay, let's update this,
Yeah.
and we have nothing, that doesn't help them. Where we
Well,
do
so-
have something,
If we've brought it to everybody's attention, I'm hoping people are giving it some thought.
Right.
If Linda and Susan are working on it, I don't know if I'm ready to scrap it today, but I think we need to keep this on the agenda and fix it.
okay.
Yeah,
Is
so
what I'm-
For the next meeting, what I'm hoping is a red line version, give this to you, whether it's a couple words, a phrase, or whatever, to add to it, that maybe the prosecutor's office is satisfied with, that it clears it up. And then that could just be another amendment to the model. And then there are other amendments that need to be made to the model, code references. There's a lot of things that could be updated, and that's going to be a continual project. That between the subdivision regulations update and the county model are like the two main large projects at this point.
All right.
Is one taking more precedent of your time than the other?
I personally take the subdivision regulations as a higher priority only because it really, the lot split process really affects people's lives and
Right.
how quickly they go through the process. And I want to streamline it, and I want to make it easier, less cumbersome for both the residents and the township zoning inspectors. So that, and that's going to be on the October agenda, assuming, I'm hoping the health department personnel can still attend.
Why don't you send that Powerall class out to everybody, just to have everybody tickle their fancy and give it some thought, because we need to address that section.
I think that's a great idea.
Thanks. Give you some more reading at night, John. Keep you up at night. Right?
And, all right, so that's great, thank you.
Thank you.
And then, we want to move on to the website update.
Okay, so again, I know I missed the last meeting, but Ms. Kovas and I did, because we had touched on the website at the last meeting, and after that, we did meet with the county ADP department. I'm sorry, ADP is the IT department, what I'm going to say, so because nobody knows what ADP stands for. So regarding updating the Planning Commission's website, so I had told them that the Planning Commission is to be involved in the update. So the Planning Commission staff had worked on a draft, so I'm gonna present that to you. But I know there was some discussion at the July meeting in updating the website quicker with far as meeting minutes. So we did have that meeting with just a representative from ADP came down, and it wasn't a very long meeting, and showed WordPress to the 3 staff members so that we can easily post the meeting minutes to the website, but then also the agendas, because the Planning Commission has never posted the agendas to the website, but through a lot of public input, we were going to be moving towards that end so that we can post the agendas. It would be posted the week before the meeting, so basically on that Tuesday. Now, I am going to have to add the caveat, our meeting agendas are always subject to change. Per our bylaws, we can change the agenda the day of the meeting. So I will be adding a clause at the end of on the agenda, subject to change per our bylaws. But we are working towards being able to upload that information. And then as of the week prior, the ADP department, the reason why Planning Commission section was kind of piggybacked onto the Planning Commission's webpage is that the licensing for the website, the county website, is expiring in February 2023, which I wasn't aware of. So adding Planning Commission as basically a subpage onto the county commissioner's website is basically the solution, is going to have to be the solution at this point. So we do have a web presence. As far as Planning Commission, I know because there was maybe some people that didn't like the idea that we looked like the Planning Commission was completely under the county commissioner's website. If the Planning Commission was interested in hosting its own website, we would have to ask county commissioners for funding for that. But I will present, this is just the draft of what the staff had, just for a basis for discussion. So this is the draft homepage. So this is generally the format of the county commissioner's website, and what we have. This isn't the language on there right now. This is the proposed draft. So the Planning Commission, a blurb about how it was established, what our duties, just a general description of what the duties are. And then the rest of it is kind of information that you would expect to have on a homepage, where we're located, the staff, the planning commission members themselves. What are our responsibilities? So there's just these 4 little tabs here. I want to expand on that, but this, for now, this is what's on the current website. Put a picture there. We would actually go out and take a picture of the actual building now that it's complete. And then, so our primary responsibilities, the subdivision regulations, the general plan, the model zoning, the holidays when we're not in the office. So that is the general design layout of the homepage. And then there is a meeting minutes page. So this is actually existing. This is what the ADP department had put over as a subset of the county commissioner's website. So again, this is about meetings. So all the meeting dates, the submittal deadlines, whether it's a replat or if it's a text amendment, so that's all on the website. And then also, it says agenda and approved meeting minutes, but right now, we just have the meeting minutes on there. So this area would be where all of the proposed meeting minutes and agendas will be located. And then Allison, so this links page, I'm gonna hand it, I'm sorry, I'm gonna catching you off guard. The links page, so right now, this is not on the website, this would be proposed.
So the idea behind this is that it would be set up similar to like the meeting minutes page, where you'll be given a list of categories, and just off the top of my head, I came up with a handful of categories. So the township zoning resolutions will just link right to the township's website as to where the resolution is located. The info sheets, once we get more of those put out, those will be listed in here. We have a page right now on our existing site called Geauga County Water Community Links, and it links to things from like USGS and water resources and a bunch of different entities regarding water in the county. Community contacts, so our directory of public officials, clerks and fiscal officers, zoning inspectors, lot splits and consolidation.